Welcome to Marketplace Tech Bytes, our weekly review of some of the biggest stories making headlines across the industry. I'm your host, Lily Jamali. This week on the show, Google bails on killing cookies. Waymo takes on alleged robotaxi vandals, and the Kamala Harris memes have officially entered the chat. Joining me this week is Paresh Dave. He is the senior writer at Wired. Welcome to you, Paresh. How you doing?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Great. Good to see you. And we're going to start, as we always do, with our bite of the week. This is a number that says a little something about the week that was in tech. Paresh, what have you been thinking about this week?
On this big occasion, I've got to go with something at the corner of sports and tech. So my number is 1.5 billion. That's the estimated number of people that are expected to watch the Olympics opening ceremony, which is a parade taking place in the River Seine. So that's 1.5 billion people either along the parade route or watching via TV or streaming.
That is a lot of eyeballs. And a huge opportunity, of course, for advertisers, which is actually a great segue into our first story. My number is 2020. That was the year that Google said it would phase out cookies in its Chrome browser. These are files that advertisers use to track us as we move around the internet. Privacy advocates loved this move when it was announced back in 2020. Advertisers, not so much. These are folks, of course, who rely on cookies to sell us things. They hated this. So help us understand why Google is reversing course on this plan to get rid of cookies.
Because replacing them is so difficult. Google proposed a number of ideas inside the Chrome browser, new features basically that would allow advertisers and other other entities on the web to continue to kind of track people, but like in a slightly more private manner where we're kind of lost in a crowd of people. And it was just hard for other companies to implement in a way that made sense. And Google itself was struggling to sort of come up with better ideas. But make no mistake, better technologies are coming, and cookies will eventually go away, in my view.
Yeah. Well, let's continue that look forward. Google is tabling this. We get that. What now is, I think, what some of us are wondering about. They talk about an updated approach that, quote, elevates user choice. What does that mean? And what does it mean for consumers?
What people believe that means is that Chrome is basically going to give users an option to turn these cookies off on their own. So rather than Google saying we're getting rid of these cookies, users can say, I want to get rid of these cookies. And it becomes less about Google acting maybe uncompetitively and users making this choice and sort of Google shifting that burden to users. And that's why, I do think that eventually everyone will want these gone.
Yeah. Well, some disappointment expressed by regulators in the United Kingdom. The Information Commissioner's Office there said it was disappointed that Google changed its plans. And it sounds like the agency had worked pretty extensively with Google to find an outcome that protected user privacy while also keeping industry and their needs in mind. Chrome, the most popular browser in the world. I am using it as we speak. Well, on to our second story, the robotaxi wars, in which there's honestly just kind of one player left standing, at least for now, and that is Waymo, the self-driving car company owned by Google parent Alphabet. The company is now suing alleged vandals of their robotaxis in San Francisco. Here is a quick look at that.
A self-driving Waymo car goes up in flames. Happened about 2 hours ago in the city's Chinatown.
Social media video appears to show it was an act of vandalism. This happened on Jackson Street. Waymo says a group of people surrounded the car and started attacking it.
So, Paresh, you've been writing about this. Why is Waymo suing?
They clearly want to send a message to people who are messing with these cars to say that we're not going to tolerate that. You're putting our riders at risk. And that's a big problem because Waymo is a young company. This is a new business. It's hard enough to get people to get into one of these cars where it's pretty creepy, right? When your first experience where you see the steering wheel sort of moving on its own, like that's a big hurdle to get over. Imagine having to get over that hurdle and then also like am I going to get attacked in this vehicle today for riding in this sort of robot? Because people are targeting these robot vehicles. That's a big concern, and Waymo does not want its reputation to be ruined.
Yes, this notion of reputational damage I found very interesting. I've also been wondering, though, I mean, not to get repetitive here, but why they're suing now? Because these issues have been going on for a while now. And Waymo is now by far the largest player. It's well surpassed its main competitor, Cruise, which is trying to figure out its next steps. That's the subsidiary of GM, which had a really rough last year. Is there something, as far as you can tell, that's pushing them to take legal action at this moment and not, say, a year ago?
I think it's two things. One is that the company is serving far more rides now, 50,000 rides per week, I think, across Phoenix, Los Angeles, and San Francisco. So that's a lot of people that they're dealing with. So there's a scale piece to it. And then two, there's a particularly violent incident back in February where a 14-year-old allegedly set fire to a Waymo. No one was in it, but that, I think, was sort of particularly galling and set in stone, sort of set this pace where Waymo is very, very concerned about incidents like that repeating.
Yeah. Well, before we move on, just quickly, want to hear where you think consumer attitudes are at on robotaxis now. I'm in LA. I've seen a couple of Waymos around, mostly on the freeway. It is nothing like it is in San Francisco, where Waymos are everywhere, mostly on city streets there. You used the term creepy a minute ago to describe what some might feel the first time getting into one of these vehicles. I'm hearing mostly positive reviews. I've even heard it called an almost religious experience.
The reviews are certainly positive, but I suggest when new people come to town here in San Francisco that they give Waymo a try. Many tourists already come here and sort of make it part of their, agenda while they're in town. But for those that don't, I often suggest it because I want to see their experience and hear about it. But there are a lot of people who are hesitant. They're like, really? Why would I do that? So I think there is still some hesitation to overcome. But Waymo's parent, Alphabet, which also owns Google, is bullish. They've said this week that they're going to put up to another $5 billion in the company over the next few years.
All right. Well, we're going to move on from all the Google subsidiaries that we've been covering these last few minutes and onto the presidential race. She is running for president, but Kamala Harris appears to be queen of the internet, at least for now. It turns out Vice President Harris is extremely memeable, Paresh. The coconut emojis are everywhere. This speech from last year is the reference. Let's watch.
Everything is in context. My mother she would give us a hard time sometimes, and she would say to us, I don't know what's wrong with you young people. You think you just fell out of a coconut tree? You exist in the context of all in which you live and what came before you.
And here is one takeoff of that. So one for the Mitski fans out there, and that is just one of many internet remixes of that speech out there right now. Paresh, I think people are a little, correct me if you disagree here, but people are a little surprised by the extent of the internet support for Kamala Harris. But if you followed her race in 2019 when she was trying to get the 2020 nomination for the Democrats, which I did, she was pretty memeable back then too.
Well, I will admit I haven't encountered any of these memes on my feeds, so I don't know if it's spread all over the internet. And I think it's also important to remember that it cuts both ways. There's also conservatives, Republicans making fun of Kamala's speeches, and sort of one of the memes going around is that clearly her speechwriter is like a 6-year-old kid, because they make no sense. And they've been parodied also on things like The Daily Show. where these are called ideas voyages and not really speeches.
Hmm.
So it does cut both ways, and it's not universal. But there are some who thinks he'll translate to the ballot box and get Gen Z out there. I'm not
Yeah.
sure.
Well, further to your point about how these memes can cut both ways, one that I remember very clearly from her last campaign was a lot of her critics started sharing the Kamala is a cop reference. She, of course, used to be the district attorney of San Francisco. And that one was not meant to be flattering back then. And I want to get your response to what the New York Times is writing about this. It says, quote, even Kamala Harris is a cop has been reclaimed with an exaggerated wink by supporters eager to fashion it into a winning general election pitch. They're saying that some of these once negative cuts have actually been flipped around to help her. You agree with that?
Yeah, I think it's a bit ironic, but our sister publication, The New Yorker, also pointed out recently that some of these recent memes, even after the debate where Biden struggled, but before he dropped out of the race, were sort of so-called Bernie bros, people who aren't exactly Kamala's supporters, were kind of posting some of these memes in a reclaimed fashion, but to make fun of her. And yet it ended up sort of sparking this cycle of excitement for her.
The important thing is that Chartreuse Green is having a moment. And I think that is really saying something. Would you agree?
Is that your color, Lily? Yes.
Can't say it.
Kamala has changed the background of her X profile, for instance, to that color. Not my jam, personally.
Yeah, nor mine. Beyonce also giving permission to Kamala Harris to use her song Freedom on the campaign trail. That also, I think, is a pretty big deal. Paresh, you are brat, and I mean that, of course, as a compliment. It is always so great to see you. Thank you for being here.
Thanks, Lily.
That was Paresh Dave of Wired. Thanks to all of you for watching Marketplace Tech Bytes Week in Review. Make sure to like this video and subscribe to us. We are at Marketplace APM. Jesus Alvarado produced this episode, and I'm Lily Tramali. This is APM.